And then we took a laser scan of that. We overlaid those two data sets. And then you could actually start to see, what was installed out of tolerance.
Welcome to the Reality Capture Network, where we focus on technology-driven innovation, education, and community. The Reality Capture Network, bringing the future to you. On this episode of the RCN Podcast, the Chief Executive Officer at VEERUM, David Lod.
So I started at IBM, worked with them for the better part of a decade. I had the opportunity then to join a company, become part owner and operator of a data center company. That's where I also kind of got more of a foray into the construction side of critical facilities to capture either video, images, and kind of stitch that together. So you've got what does the actual existing facility look like, and how can you bring in the metadata from these CAD files or the schematics, and how can this all come together?
And we look at all these amazing tools and we're like, how do we encourage more people to get into this industry?
The journey to get there certainly is still a challenge, right? It's just changing the way people work. That's probably one of the biggest things. An ability to just have that time, that sounding board, and get their input. That's the most important part of this journey, is the fact that they'll give us that time.
Welcome to another episode of the Reality Capture Network podcast. Today, we're excited to have David with us. David, thanks for joining today.
Yeah, thrilled to be here, Matt. As I mentioned, congratulations on all the success creating an awesome community with RCN.
Oh, we appreciate that, and it's a pleasure getting to know you guys and your platform, and excited to dig into our conversation a little bit today around digital twins and this virtual environments and all these new technologies. But as our normal process on our podcast, I love first talking about the individual that's on and kind of learning their story. I think there's a lot of power in sharing the journey that people have had and learning what was your background, what was the career that led you into what you're focused on today. I think it helps us kind of learn perspective and maybe the information behind that individual and the company. So I'd love to start out taking us through a little bit of your career journey, maybe even back to what you focused on early days.
Yeah, sure. I got my start, my professional career. So I joined IBM right out of university. So I worked with them down in Toronto and Ontario there. Absolutely fabulous company to start your career. Like, what a learning ground, and, a lot of mentors and people to learn about technology, which was incredibly exciting. And if I think back, it was about the year 2000 I joined, and that, that might seem like it was probably, 5-6 years ago. Believe it or not, it was 23 years ago.
Wow.
when we reference that, right? Time flies. So I started at IBM, worked with them for the better part of a decade, and then they transferred me out to Calgary. And when I came out to Calgary, Alberta, which, as everyone knows, is, oil and gas country out this way, right? We've got large industry here. Absolutely a vibrant and entrepreneurial city to be a part of. I had the opportunity then to join a company, become part owner and operator of a data center company. And this, goes back well in advance of, cloud computing being available, which we leverage today. And that's an important part of the story here. But what we did was we built these large, 20, 30 megawatt facilities to outsource all of our clients' IT. So they would put all their servers and storage and infrastructure into these, the top secret data centers that had, the incredible cooling and power and all that resiliency. And that's where I also kind of got a little bit of more of a foray into the construction side of critical facilities, right? These are multi-million-dollar builds, critical timelines, huge amount of infrastructure. Like, some of the costs to build these were, $2,000 a square foot when you think of the, the infrastructure going in. So a lot of money, a lot of critical path items. And, the day you turn it on is the last day it turns off, right? These things don't go off anymore. You've got to have that resilient power, that infrastructure, the cooling. And, we kind of looked at that, and I even thought back then, there's got to be a better way to kind of, look at this, progress this. It was all done, antiquated with, spreadsheets, big schematics and all that getting done. And the end result was always fabulous. But then it became, how could we show this to clients or, tour global clients and not just with a video, but, when you really look at these types of facilities, you want to see the single line diagrams, right? You want to be able to look under the floor. You want to be able to go into the power rooms, but you can't bring clients in there because of the risk of, arc flash. And these are huge power rooms that you can't walk people through. So I started to think about what could we do to, this comes back to the reality of these facilities, to capture either video, images, and kind of stitch that together. So you've got, what does the actual existing facility look like, and how can you bring in, the metadata from these CAD files or the schematics, and how can this all come together? And that technology really didn't exist or wasn't at scale. And then, along sort of comes cloud infrastructure and, AWS, Azure, and all these hyperscalers start putting stuff together. And that whole data center space shifted from what I call going after the end client or the retail client to put their 40 cabinets with you, to now you want to go after the hyperscalers because they're the ones that are now servicing those retail clients in a different fashion, right? So you want to be able to have that latency and those cloud effects there. So did that, worked in a data center company as head of sales and marketing. We sold that company to Rogers Communications, which is a large telecom cable provider up here in Canada. I worked with them for some time, ran their data center and enterprise wireline business for Canada, and then got asked to go join another organization, Shaw. They had spent a little over $1 billion acquiring data center facilities in the US. They wanted to bring that up into Canada, so I helped with that. And then Shaw ended up divesting of that. And through that period, I had the opportunity to meet with VEERUM and their original founders, and they said, listen, we think we've got something here that has an opportunity to really, drive a new way of operating facilities, to progress construction management, to work differently with these large industrial assets. And I was really intrigued. I saw the application this could have also had for the data center space, the telecom industries. Being in Calgary, of course, oil and gas, utility, large scale manufacturing. And so I was fortunate enough to take the role as CEO, and we had to kind of rebuild the organization. This was a little over 4 years ago. And, it was 4 years of really trying to educate the market on a new way of working, right? Working visually, working, reality first. And I think we've just kind of gotten over those foothills here where clients are now, calling and pulling for these types of services, right? They want a new way to work. They want, an ability to, we call it, be on site without going to site, collaborating with, specialists from around the world and be right in these physical facilities. And now that cloud computing has gotten to that level, we've got the ability for the software development to get to the levels that we need. And the price to do reality capture is certainly commoditizing and decreasing to what it was 5 years ago, right? It used to maybe cost you $100,000, take you several days to capture a facility. We're seeing this done with like a Navis VLX in a matter of, half an hour, and you're getting, great imagery with panoramic point cloud capture on the same device. So all of these opposing challenges have sort of solved for themselves. And now we got an opportunity to bring an incredible lightweight digital twin platform with high value to our clients. And I'm very excited to be a part of that journey. We've got a great team that's pushing this.
That's great. Well, I appreciate the background story there, and kind of hearing some of what you've gone through the data center side and the telecom, and getting to work insights and see the need for better data and better ways of working that ultimately leads to where you are now and what you guys are doing at VEERUM. I'd love to hear a little bit. So from the VEERUM side, you mentioned you joined about 4 or 5 years ago and had to kind of do some restructuring and figuring out, the process of convincing clients really. And obviously, I think even in the last 5 years, we've seen a massive change in the awareness of digital technologies, from scanners and point clouds and models, and this idea of digital twins. I mean, even several years ago, nobody was saying digital twin. And now today, everybody's saying it and has different meanings things and you know, but you know, tell us a little bit of maybe a little more detail in what that last few years has looked like. You know, when you first joined and you guys are kind of looking at convincing clients and you're coming up with what your value is to them and why they should look at adopting this virtual way of working, to where it kind of has gone over the next, you know, 4 years.
Yeah, wonderful question. And where VEERUM really got its genesis and start was in large capital construction projects. And one of our co-founders, Scott Benish, who's still with our organization, he was a large construction project manager and director. And he said, there's got to be a better way to do this. You know, I'm getting progress reports from a variety of either subcontractors or groups. You know, the data's coming in late. I don't know if I can trust it. And these are, you know, $1 billion projects, right? So any schedule slip or rework and all that is a massive cost. So, you know, he had the idea of, what if we had the CAD design file, and then, you know, this is in its basic form, and then we took a laser scan of that. We overlaid those two data sets, and then you could actually start to see, you know, what was installed out of tolerance, or perhaps, you know, what was missing, and start to progress off of real data points, and starting to do this almost in, you know, real time, or, you know, next day after you're able to do the analysis. So that's where VEERUM had its start. And, you know, we delivered some significant ROI to some large clients where we found, whether it's, you know, clash detection or, you know, spools that were going to fit up or tie in, as an example, where there were, you know, chromium carbide overlaid and they had to be done at fab shop. So if it was, you know, discovered on the day of a shutdown, on, you know, day 6 of a 7-day shutdown, didn't fit, you know, now we're talking about pushing this back, and you've got finger pointing between a variety of, you know, groups. So we started to show clients like, hey, you can save multi-millions of dollars by doing things a little bit differently, you know, identify big critical path items that are at risk. And there's a new way of doing this. So we took that and those key learnings, and the more we looked at this, we said, you know what? Construction is it's a big piece of the asset life cycle, right? So you get into kind of, you know, design, planning, engineering, construction. But at the end of the day, these large facilities are being built, and they're going to last for 25, 50, in some case, 100 years. So when you get into that operations and maintenance side of the business, that's where there's incredible value and incredible, you know, tenure and stickiness for a solution like VEERUM. So we made a conscious pivot to not just go after construction projects, but show the client the value of the data that they would capture, both from, you know, pulling the original CAD models through and all that metadata, but really providing a reality capture, a laser scan view of these facilities, either through construction, but then handing that package over and that data into operations and maintenance. And then we saw a huge pickup from clients that are using it in maintenance planning, right? Or, you know, remote project controls work, as well as, you know, integrating now with IoT and, you know, SCADA systems. So what we're created was a single pane of glass, as we call it, to see all of your design files, all of your geospatial data, all of your document management, all of your, you know, IoT and third-party sensor data. So one login, one screen to bring all these data sources together. And now clients are starting to be like, I like this reality first model, right? I want to see the site conditions as I'm starting to plan a lot of these activities, you know, whatever they may be. That's tremendously valuable when you can reduce the requirement for clients to go on site. The fact that they don't have to acquire and duplicate data that they probably already had, right, or had captured at some other stage during the asset lifecycle, it becomes this fantastic new way of working. And not only are clients seeing massive productivity gains, you know, we're seeing like 30, 40% productivity in like maintenance planning just by, you know, leveraging VEERUM as a tool. The new inbound workforce that's coming is not interested in working off spreadsheets and, you know, rolling out old papers and looking in 8 different systems to find the data they need. They're demanding new digital tools that work, and they want them to work well and work now. So we have that, right? And we can go live in 48 hours with our clients, which is really unheard of, right? It's imagine having an operational digital twin within 2 days of, pressing start. So it becomes this real fast time to value, right? ROI is one thing, Matt. So I'll tell you, clients are like, well, if the ROI is 10x or 100%, this looks really good. But that's not as important as time to value. If you can show like within a month, somebody is getting a return and a value, that's a win, right? Because long gone are the days of, 1 and 2 year ROIs on these big digital transformation projects. You need a fast win that people can anchor around.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And I'm just sitting here remembering when I got started in scanning about 13 years ago, and our very first use of scanning was in oil and gas facilities. And back then, I remember the first couple years of doing it, I would see multiple scan companies working in the same facility, and they would take that approach of, like you're talking about, the early use of it was a construction job. One company would go out and scan a specific tank or use it for checking verification, and then the data would get thrown away, and then someone else would come out and scan in the same exact area, even though someone was just out there the week before. Yeah. So I kept saying over the years, I was like, at some point, we have to have a process to not just do project base and throw the data away, but like, what do we do with that data? How do we get more value out of it? How do we get more people to use it? Because you now look at this idea, like you're saying, when you get the data in a usable position for safety planning and for maintenance planning and for multiple design teams, and it makes it easier for the client to adopt as well, because you're not looking at just the scan of whatever service or product you're looking at for one job. Now you're spreading it across 4 departments and 7 projects and I think that's also why industrial facilities was one of the first really adopters, even back when it was super expensive, is like you talked about, shutdowns and delays and things when your design and your fit is not right. That benefit of true accuracy of what really sits there helps you be able to design, fabricate, install with a certainty, and that savings is just far exceeds the cost of adopting any of the tools today.
Yeah, absolutely. That's as you indicated, repeated laser scans and losing that data. That's a common problem, right? In the industry, and it's starting to be solved a little bit. But at the end of the day, even like the old McKinsey report would say, 30% of valuable data is lost at handover between construction into operations and maintenance, right? So you could put that geospatial laser scan data into that. Where did it go, right? Could have been on a hard drive. Cloud computing is now ready to take on these large geospatial data sets, right? Like VEERUM, as an example, has made them web streamable now, right? So now they can be shared and used, because generally you needed a high-powered workstation. Only one subject matter expert knew how to use it. Well, it's locked away and it's not valuable to the company at that point. So how do you elevate and integrate it with other data is one of the problems that we're solving. And then the other piece here on why, laser scan data and this 3-dimensional view of these facilities is important is, as humans, we're designed and hardwired to learn in 3D, as you can appreciate, right? We can understand 3-dimensional data versus 2D textual 60,000 times faster, right? And we retain what we learn in 3D 400% better than if we were to read it on text. So part of, whether it's the education or the sales process to our clients becomes, it's the responsibility of the leaders in these organizations to give the data to their employees in a fashion that humans are hardwired to interpret, understand, and be productive with it, right? So why would you be handing it back in a way that doesn't align with how humans are learn and retain data? So if you can change the way they consume it and present it to them, you're automatically getting massive productivity gains and unlocking that creative potential that humans have, right? Let's take away the, that cognitive load, as some people call it, of kind of figure out what's there, present it in a way that it's already there, and then let them get on with their day.
Yeah, exactly. And like you talked about, and I think is a big topic that's probably not talked about enough, is the new workforce that is coming into the industry, right? There are so many people that will step into the job and they don't even really know how to look at drawings. But like, that's not how most people are trained today. They're learning BIM, they're learning 3D modeling softwares, they're coming out of school, learning virtual reality, and like they're gaming. They understand these 3D environments, they love visual, and that stuff has increased so much to now go back and say, here's a set of drawings, and you have to try to picture that and visualize what it looks like, and if there's clashes, we're at the point in the industry that change technologically is happening. And the companies that like resist it, they're the ones who are going to have struggle. I think it's a huge benefit to companies, even in the hiring process. There's a known labor shortage across a lot of the construction industry, from survey companies to, construction on site. And we look at all these amazing tools and we're like, how do we encourage more people to get into this industry? Not only is the technology beneficial and it's savings and it's safer but I think it also helps us with efficiencies. So maybe one, we can actually do more with less people because there is a labor shortage. Yep. And then two, the technologies I think can also be what help us attract more people into these industries. We don't have to look at construction and facilities and survey as this, old man's job who, you're just going to stand out in the heat and sweat, or you're just, sitting calculating numbers all day. It's actually creating a fun work environment.
It is. And I think we would be incredibly foolish to think that we are not going to gamify, right? You're not going to create the gamification of these particular legacy industries, right? Whether oil and gas, utility, or otherwise. Like, are you telling me that we should continue on the same path, right, to do this? This is what happens. You have OpEx pressures of maintaining and operating these facilities, right? And as they age, those costs increase, right? The infrastructure ages, right? Warranties change. So you have this driving piece. And generally budgets are going the other way too, right? You're getting OpEx pressures on the budget. So the only way that these two things work together is by introducing technology to do things differently and unlock the power and potential of different productivity, different gains, saving both in CapEx and in OpEx. And so, business leaders need to look at this and say, this will become gamified, right? This is a data play and data continuity play. We need to be able to put this into the hands of our workforce to make them truly effective and excited to come to work, right? We're looking at this too as, if you just look at, Chat GPT and what it's doing from a 2D textual perspective, basically kind of scraping internet and collecting and using the right prompts to generate something, right? But it's been fed a massive data set that's been publicly available. Now think of this, rather than that 2D version of data. Now imagine if we start to feed those types of models a 3D representation or 3D data. So now imagine having access to, let's say we've got, 50 ammonia plants, or, the CAD models of those. Imagine being able to go into like an AI generative model and say, create me an ammonia plant, of this size, of this capacity, at this location, and it starts to generate and does AI generative engineering, right? That's going to change the way that engineers are now going to have to work, because their role will change. A lot of that work can be done, but that element of human creativity and then incorporating that will ultimately change. It'll tie into supply chain. Everything will come together, right? And so the digital twin space, and you brought it up earlier, very gray, right? It was like, okay, so what is it? Is a process digital twin? Is it an infrastructure digital twin? It really took it on the chin. It was exciting as a buzzword for about a year or two, and then it got painted with an ugly brush and nobody really wanted to touch it, but it's back. Okay, so now it's back.
Yeah.
It seemed to have got a regenesis, right? Which is cool, because it really is important, right? If you look at the Gartner charts on what technology changes are going to have the biggest impact in the next 1 to 3 years, digital twin is right on that radar, right? It's not a 5 or 10 year thing out. It is a now thing. And that button is huge because it's going to change the industries and how we work with these tools.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. And I think we see that happen often with buzzwords and things that get thrown out is that, we see the same with metaverse and with digital twin of like, it gets this hyper focus and it gets so much attention and then it disappears because there is so much fluff that happens that people are throwing the word around with not a whole lot of meaning behind it. It disappears. But then when you see it come back to life, that's because the people who actually understand where the value and what the use of that thing is going to be in real projects or real case scenario are starting to actually gain traction and harness that power and implement it. And I think that the future of digital twins is massive. Like you're talking about with the AI stuff and the integration there, that's one of the biggest things that I think when I think digital twin in our future is imagine every building having a digital twin. Every building has the data linked into it. The ability to query and to take, again, the example of ChatGPT where it's got this learned language model so it can give you answers better than you Googling something, because Googling, you're looking for an already published article somewhere. AI is taking all the information and putting together an actual answer. I think about the same with our data and with digital twins is no longer is it one guy who's going to go open the model and try to find a measurement, do look for some type of calculation. Yeah. If we can integrate that type of technology in the future into the geospatial data and the information that's linked to it, you're now able to do predictive analytics and simulations and, ask it, hey, how many people could I have in this area before, structural. I think it's going to get crazy, but I really do think that is the future of the digital twin space.
I agree. And everything you've said resonates as well with our thoughts at VEERUM. And this again comes down to data, right? And data capture, data preservation, structuring it in the right way that it could be maximized, right? Maximize the output, the value of it. What we do caution our clients as well sometimes when they're looking at, creating a digital twin, of their facility going on this journey, they say, we love what you're showing us. That's what we want. Our data just isn't ready, right? We have, SAP data and that needs to be all cleaned up and fixed and all that kind of stuff. It said that will be a forever science project that you guys will undertake, and your best opportunity for your fastest win is to actually do a reality capture of your facility, right? We'll bring in any potential, CAD models or other underlying data that might be available today, but start working in reality. And you'll actually be able to visually see where your data gaps are rather than try to solve it again in that 2D textual piece. We've helped clients go like, holy cow, we had 30,000 asset tags that were tagged to the wrong facility, and now we can see them and we can solve that, right? So what probably would have taken them, 6 months and some data wrangling, they got to see it right away and it was a quick fix. So these things should be running in parallel, right? So clients should be like, let's stand up the digital twin or the visualizations of our operating facilities, our infrastructure, and start to work differently with it and augment it with the data as it becomes better or fixed. You don't have to turn on every layer of everything day one, but if you can't see it, I'm not too sure where you're starting from, right? So why wouldn't you want to see that first? So I think that's got huge potential for, the survey and the laser scan business and the drone business, all of these organizations, right? Yeah, we just educate people on, whether it's control points, the right ways to do it, but you're seeing some awesome technology coming in, some really exciting companies that are like, hey, they see the massive potential here to help clients.
Yeah.
And it's unlocking big value. And how we look at it is, what are friction points that clients have that is stopping them from taking on, a digital twin here? And sometimes they're like, we don't have the expertise, or we're not going to get a laser scan, or we can't do this. So we have to kind of be like, hey, this can be done very simply. It can be done quickly. Here's the tools. It could be outsourced, or you could do it in-house, right? And pull away some of these, friction points for clients to really get their hands into the tool. That's the key piece, right? Because nobody wants to go back to the old way once they experience the new exciting way of doing it. Like we had one client said it takes them 20 minutes now to do a maintenance plan with no site visit. It used to take them 8 hours, 7 different systems, and a site visit. So nobody wants to go back to that old way, right? But you got to get that buy-in. You got to get people to really kind of lean on it. But it's all coming together from all areas, right? And big gains in reality capture is helping push that, right? Everybody wants to see that cool version of their facility. It's like the first time you ever saw your house on Google Earth, you're like, oh my God. And then they went and scanned it again. 3 years later, you're like, well, that's cool. And you're kind of waiting for the next one. It's the same thing we see in the digital twin space. Everyone's like, oh, can we get a recent laser scan? Can we get that part of the facility that we didn't do earlier, right? Like people want more and more because it's kind of cool and sexy. But secondly, they're actually doing some pretty creative things on how they're working, right? And how they're communicating with other people, whether it's in the field, head office, or otherwise.
Yeah. I think that's an important point too, is that a lot of times we see, people who get into the technology push just the technology and what they think you can do with it. And what I've seen over the years, even just on the laser scanning side, is a lot of times you have to just work really closely with who that actual client is, because they find ways to use the data and get value out of it that you might have never even thought of. And that's ultimately the goal, right? Is dependent on the industry and the client and what their business is then where can we actually fit this in? What is the biggest ROI or the most, use you're going to get out of the data? But I was sitting here thinking while you're talking about the adoption process too, I know it might be like a silly example, but I picture a lot of these that have not adopted yet. It's like a kid standing at the edge of a pool. And, at first everyone's always scared to get that first jump in, and then once they're in, they don't want to get out. You end up loving being in, you're glad you did it. But I think innovation, we always try to push the technology. And innovation is difficult. It's scary. A lot of companies are afraid of change and what it's going to do to disrupt systems. And yet, once we can kind of get that pilot going and get the first taste of what that data actually does for them, you find that it's literally invaluable. I mean, it's so valuable you can't put a number on it. Like, again, we use one project shutdown example of, hey, if you reduce a shutdown in a facility on one project, by 1 day, how much does that save you? Now, what if this is your process for your whole enterprise, for every facility, for every project? It becomes a massive value when we look at the long-term play of companies that really do adopt. And the other piece I like to remind people too, a lot of times we look back at other people who have been successful in implementing and we wish, man, we should have started early. Innovation and adopting processes takes time. And so you can't wait until, 5 years from now and then just want to implement it and you're good to go. You also just have to start that process. Like you're saying, don't wait till all your data is perfect and ready, because it probably never will be. You have to start with what can you start with today, and is the value in what you can do today worth getting started, and then build a process to keep integrating and improving as you go.
Yeah, for sure. Everybody wants to be at the end point in the finish line where, hey, this digital transformation project is 100% complete. Look at all our facilities. They're all integrated. Everyone's working well. That journey to get there certainly is still a challenge, right? And a lot of it is just changing the way people work. That's probably one of the biggest things. Like, we know the economics work, we know the technology can work, but there's a change management process within companies that has a hesitancy to get there, but they do need to start. Absolutely. That's an incredibly important piece of all of this. And, we encourage our clients to look at this and say, don't just think of this as, hey, we're going to digitize one well pad. And, also we get like a, 5-10x return on some measurables that they have here. True ROI comes when you look at digitization at scale, meaning all of your sites, right? All of your processes and pulling that through the entire infrastructure and asset base that you have. A lot of people kind of get like, hey, let's just get this one up and running and then, we'll go from there. But we have clients that have said single site, they saw, a 10x ROI, but when they looked at the scale of bringing it across, all 7 facilities, it was a 40x, right?
Yeah.
So there's big gains to have at the back end of a digitization journey that a lot of people don't maybe see or don't calculate, right? So that's an important part of it, right? So you got to get the dollars, the buy-in, and the executive push to do this. Because the other piece of this that we talked to, and this can even be done at a board level, really is this is a business continuity and resiliency play, right? When the pandemic rolled in, we saw a big surge of clients that normally took a year to make, a SaaS purchase or, kind of go down this, make decisions in 2 months, being like, we've got to find a way to see what's going on at site. We can't bring contractors in there. We have to limit the amount of, workers and foot traffic. How can we do this, right? And it became, okay, we got to really make this happen in the digital twin space. So it's not just a nice to have, it becomes a business continuity and execution piece, right?
Yeah.
And it's same in CapEx projects. The second you pause or delay, and this happened in COVID, like you could have like a 2-year build on something. If you had to pause it for a month or two, even a week, when you lose momentum in a massive project like that, it's not like a week to catch back up. You want to try to realign every subcontractor, your entire supply chain, your delivery. You're moving this thing out, a quarter, 6 months. So how do you maintain momentum? And a lot of this is a digital twin can help with that continuity of that project, and a lot of stuff can get done and communicated, and bids can be done remotely, right? So it's a big piece.
Yeah. Oh man, so much value I see in the future for the people getting into these technologies. It's exciting to be on this side where we are in the technology. You're in the technology. You see it, and then I find so much really joy out of when you get a client to actually finally adopt a tool that is going to give them value and they aren't doing it yet or they're hesitant, and you see them really, the eyes open when they get that first taste and they see what can be done with that data and the value come out of it. That's why I'm excited about really the industry in whole. I feel like there are so many industries, so many clients and projects that haven't touched any of it yet. Some of us have been in it in scanning and reality capture and modeling for 10 or 15 years. When I look at the amount of people I talk to, I still say I think we're at like 20% or 15% of adoption. I think there is so much scale to still happen. The people that focus on it now are really going to be a part of that journey here in the future.
Yeah, so at VEERUM, we built our company sort of from industry into tech versus, trying to drag tech into industry. If you look at all the individuals that work in our organization, they're, 20-year maintenance planners for, like a Shell, or we had, boots on the ground survey individuals in geospatial, technicians and engineers and large capital construction project managers. So they knew the pain points, and they've made this leap to come work with this software company, VEERUM, because they're like, that's exactly the problem that I had. But this is a whole big world that's going to be generated, and they can see where their expertise fits in that client journey.
Yeah. And
that's been really good. So I call it, we get a lot of street credit when we go and talk to clients, right? Because we've kind of lived in the trenches and turned the bolts, and there's a different way of doing it. And they can appreciate that. So we're talking on the same language. And where I think we've sort of outpaced some of our competitors or some other potential startups getting in the space, they came with, hey, we understand tech and cloud very well, and we can generate that. But at the end of the day, the client's the most important part. So if you truly don't understand those persona-based pain points and how this is going to be sold and delivered and executed within, a company, and how you support that, doesn't matter what kind of tech you have.
Yeah, I think that's a big point. And, I give all startups and people pursuing something new big credit for, taking the risk, pushing the boundaries, trying something new, innovation. But it is very different when you see people that have integrated with industry knowledge, because, I've seen a lot of other technologies that really have that technology focus. And even when they're pushing a product or they're selling a product, they're focused so much on selling that some of the salespeople don't even know the details of what they're selling, and sometimes you're selling the wrong piece of gear, or you're not explaining what needs to be done with it. And And that's where I think the good, proper education of all the tools, all the software, all the platforms, and making sure that whoever's adopting it is really the right fit is another way we're going to see the industry scale, because nobody wants to get sold something and then they buy it and it doesn't work the way they thought it was going to. So I think having that industry integration and really already knowing the pain points that you're trying to solve when you're developing something that it overall really is still a new industry, I think is very valuable.
Yeah. Well, the client experience, as I mentioned, it really needs to be frictionless. It needs to work the first time. You have to have your arms wrapped around the client in these early days, right? Because this is new technology. They need that support, right? You can't just sort of hand them the keys to, an application or a platform and expect it to work, because, if you're like me and you log into something and you forget your password, or you get in, it doesn't work the first time, you don't really want to go back, and you don't have much time to do this, right? So it's, how do you make that first step that important, right? And so we really focused on that. And we also don't know all the answers. And you had alluded to this earlier. We've been incredibly fortunate that we have some amazing clients of multi-verticals and disciplines that, participate in our client advocacy group. But they're the ones that say, hey, I know we were using it for these three things, but we actually are doing this and this. And we're like, that has applicability across a bunch of verticals and a bunch of use, and the tech already works to do it. So how do we, productize that particular use case? Because the clients are going to tell you how they're going to get the biggest benefit. So an ability to just have that time, that sounding board, and get their input, that's the most important part of this journey, is the fact that they'll give us that time.
That's great. Yeah, and I think that's a great way to get the feedback and make integration as you continue developing a new platform. It's incredible. So you guys are doing great work. I'd love to just, maybe last couple thoughts or questions here. When you look at, obviously we've talked about a lot of the pain points for maybe clients and kind of some of that adoption process. When you look at the industry kind of in whole, from the capture to how you guys are using the data, and I'm sure you guys have a whole roadmap of things you want to do, what do you think are still some of the big challenges that you see in the industry in whole? Great
question. So one, let's not forget about data privacy and data security, right? Unless you've got your, ISO 27001, your SOC 2 Type 2, these are now table stakes to basically be able to take this industrial data and do these integrations with existing clients. So that, if whatever company you're working with, that almost becomes the first gate you better be able to clear. Don't care how exciting this is. That's a major piece, right? So we made some investments early to take that away, right? And that's a big piece. The second is making sure that clients are prepared and are ready to consume this from the web or from the cloud. There are still some legacy industries or some organizations that aren't ready to do this cloud-based. So they're looking for like an on-premise solution. It can be done that way, but might not be the ideal client at this time. So there's that piece of friction. So you got to get rid of that. And then if you don't have buy-in at the top, basically, who owns the OpEx budget for this facility or plant? Can they see the benefit? And is there direction and buy-in from leadership in these companies? Otherwise, it's just a little small science project, or, somebody wants to tinker around. You've got to have that buy-in on the vision and the direction that, they're doing asset information modeling. They need a visualization layer, and this is going to be the new way of working. If you've got that buy-in, your likelihood for success and adoption is, exponentially higher that you'll succeed. And then you've got to have the field worker and, that frontline worker has to have buy-in and excitement and interest, and they have to see a benefit of using these technologies, right? Whether it makes it easier or otherwise. Because if they don't, and they're not pulling and requesting and demanding it, it will also die on the vine, right? It'll get rejected. Because what I would say happened probably about 3 or 4 years ago as well, I would categorize a lot of the see frontline workers having digital fatigue, meaning corporate threw 1,000 tools at them, some cool initiatives, and a lot of these fail because there's too much too often. So now everybody's a little gun shy on taking anything else in. So you got to be cognizant of that. And it's like, how do we show immediate value and a high impact with limited work? Nobody wants another full-time job to try to take on a new technology. So how do you take that friction out? So those are kind of three big things there. And of course, from an economics perspective, if there isn't a true measurable ROI, then it also probably has no merit. So how do you help the client measure that, right? And report on that?
Yeah. Well, I think those are all great points, lots of value in there. Now, if you wrap all of those up, what is your current feel on the adoption and the growth of, even through all these different challenges we've talked about? What's your current outlook on the adoption and the future in the next few years?
Yeah, I'd say we're probably at less than 10% of kind of true adoption. We've got a bunch of companies that are testing this out, right, that are figuring it out, but some that are having massive successes and they're moving a lot quicker. But I think over the next few years, you're going to see this into the 30, 40, 50% adoption and drive rate. Like, we are just, coming up the curve here of, we've had early adopters, and now, like, we can tell we're getting a lot of inbound, or, our clients are referring us to other clients through, industry events or otherwise. So I think there's going to be a massive surge, and what that's going to do is create requirements for, more regular data capture, better, data standards. It's going to put a push on, cloud computing, the ability for us to deliver, because I have a feeling it's going to explode. So one of the secrets for us is, how do we continue to deliver that outcome in 48 hours? And how do we still wrap our arms around the client and create a scalable business that, they can really teach their own organization, right, outside of VEERUM having to do that. So we're on that journey, but it is going to come fast and hard.
Yeah. No, I really completely agree. And that's why I try to raise awareness to all this future of technology, because as soon as we get that interest in mass adoption, who's going to do all this work?
That's right.
There's a labor shortage. There's a shortage of technologists. There's a shortage of people that know all this even exists. And so we're going to see a massive demand for people who become experts in this space, who can help with data, who can help with capture, who can, work with delivery teams. So I think it's a huge opportunity. When I get people who reach out and they're like, hey, my kid's graduating high school and they don't know what they want to do yet, I'm like, get into laser scanning, come learn Revit, get into models. Like, this technology is going to be a big career in the future, which I also think answers the fear of, oh man, these technologies or AI is going to replace jobs. I think it's the opposite. I think we're going to find so much to do with the data and the technologies that these technologies, they don't replace a job. They might shift someone's focus to something else and then create 7 more jobs. So I think there's a huge future in front of us. Okay, I know we're short on time here. I got my very last question that I'd like to end with.
Sure.
This goes back to kind of the personal. So I love asking this of people. If you could go back and give yourself some advice, 20, 25 years ago, and maybe it's something that would even correlate to some other people earlier in their career, what's some things you'd say you've learned over your journey up to where you are today that you would advise?
Awesome questions, and I got to think this one through. But I always encourage everyone to say, you're never really going to be qualified for the job you're applying for. And if you are, it's probably not a stretch for you and you're not getting out of your comfort zone. Just keep stretching beyond, right? Like, I always say, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up, right? I have the awesome opportunity to work with this incredible software company that's changing the way people are doing things here. But every day is a learning day in some capacity, right? And we try to, encourage that. So, I guess it would be, just stretch, right? Go for it, right? Nothing is out of anybody's reach. Just, it's all about drive, right? Passion is one thing and motivation is one thing, but drive is an everyday thing that you you got to have within your character that'll get you to go a little further.
Yeah, I love that. And I agree. I think that excitement, that pushing the boundary, putting in the work, I think there's a lot of opportunity. And especially for those that are driven or have that passion that do actually come in and push themselves, there's a big future ahead for people that get in this space. So appreciate your time today, your share about VEERUM and what you guys are doing, sharing your journey. We definitely look forward to seeing where this journey goes together. So thanks for coming on the show today. We're excited to share this out with the community.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. We'll see you down in Boise shortly here for your event. And thanks for having me on today.